In this lesson, we'll learn how we can soften the skin while maintaining a level of texture. So let's go ahead and continue on. All right, so now that we've made adjustments to the placement of the nose and the left eyebrow area, I'm ready to draw our attention to the skin itself. So once you're happy with the removal of various wrinkles on the face and the degree to which certain ones are visible and even major blemishes, you can start to really get in there and examine the skin and look for little indiscrepancies. If you look here on the side of the cheeks, for example, you see kind of these little raised kind of areas, little whelps, little bumps, whatever you want to call them, probably from years of exposure being out in the sun. And so what I want to do is just kind of lessen their intensity, if you want to think of it like that. I want to kind of soften the skin, kind of smooth it slightly, but not to a point to where it feels plastic or porcelain. Okay, so we're going to go through some specific steps. There's a lot of different ways you could go about doing this. I'm going to share with you one way that I think you might find relatively fast and effective. So let's go ahead and make another merged copy of everything we have done thus far. So just as we did in the previous lesson with one of our visible layers selected, hit Shift, Control, Alt, and E. Gives us another merged copy right there. Let's come up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Bear in mind that we're not going to be blurring anything at this point. I just want to use the radius here as kind of a gauge. And so what I'm looking for are the varying tones in the skin, and I basically want to take that value to a point to where they start to blend together relatively smoothly. So probably right about there would be fine. Now don't click OK. We're going to take this value that we have here as we see these tones start to blend together smoothly, and we're going to use it for another filter effect, okay? And also keep in mind that the value that we have right here will be different. It'll vary depending on the image you're working with, so keep that in mind. Click Cancel, come back up to Filter, this time go to Other and choose High Pass. And often I've used High Pass to kind of sharpen an image, kind of make certain areas pop. But what I want to do is enter in that same value of 12.6 in this case into the high pass radius box right there. And you can kind of see what it looks like right now. Let's go ahead and click OK. All right, very good. Now let's go back to Filter, and we're going to go to Blur this time. And this time we will add a little bit of blur. Okay? And so this time, how do we kind of dictate how much we're going to blur? Well, a good measuring approach for this particular method is to apply a value that's 1/3 of the value you use for the high pass. So if you're bad at math, break out the old calculator, dust it off. In this case, you would take 12.6 and divide it by 3, and that should give you a value of 4.2. And so we'll go ahead and click OK this time. All right, so what we've essentially done here is we're laying the groundwork for the texture to be retained. Okay, so what I want to go ahead and do now is take this texture layer essentially, and I want to go ahead and invert it. So with the layer selected, hit Control I on your keyboard, that inverts it. Still looks pretty crazy, kind of scary looking, but again, we're going through some specific steps that you'll see begin to come together here pretty quickly. So what I want to do now is change the blend mode to apply this layer over everything that we basically have done thus far. So come up here to where it says normal. You can see all your blend modes. And we're going to use linear light. So go ahead and choose linear light. And again, we've basically laid the groundwork for the texture to be preserved. And what's happening now, it's kind of looking overly smoothed, okay? That's kind of becoming the dominant thing right now. So this is where we want to change the percentage for the opacity. And again, this value as well, that's going to vary depending on the image you're working with. So you want to just kind of play around with that and take it to a point to where you think it works best visually. But I'm kind of liking what we have right here at about 20%. We could probably go maybe a little bit higher, but I kind of feel like 20% or so is the ticket. So if I just hide and unhide the visibility of this layer, it's a subtle change, but I think it helps, especially right here on the cheeks. You can kind of see the difference. Now, what we want to do is, the problem that's happening now is it's being applied to everything, not just the skin. So I don't really want it applied to the hair and the eyes and the eyebrows. So this is where we can add a layer mask. Okay, and what I want to actually go ahead and do is change that layer mask and fill it with black. So you can actually just go ahead and invert it, hitting Control I. Alternatively, you could have held down Alt and clicked that button. Basically, everything in black, it's masked out. And so we'll use white as our foreground color to reveal the areas of the skin where we want that texture to be revealed. So using my brush tool, I'll right-click, bring up my brush preset picker. We'll use a soft round default brush. And since I'm using a stylus, I like to go into my brush panel, turn on transfer. And just as before, I like to have both controls for opacity and flow set to pin pressure, just because I can dictate them based off of how much pressure I apply with my stylus. And so now I'm just kind of coming over the areas of the skin, making sure you have your thumbnail for your mask selected. And we're starting to reveal those changes we just made to the skin. And you start to make those comparisons as you go. So I'm just kind of going over all of the skin here. I'm applying a good bit of pressure in these areas, around the cheeks, around the mouth, over the nose. Up here on the forehead, maybe not so much. I was noticing it felt just a little bit too blurry, just kind of right in there. So I'm being a little bit lighter, and you can even tell just based off of the value right there, it appears a little bit more grayish right there in the thumbnail. Okay, but again, just kind of making those comparisons there, and I feel like that's working pretty well. Another thing I wanted to mention really quick about the nose, you probably have noticed it's kind of out of focus, and there's not a whole lot we can really do about that. This is a stock photo that we're using from iStock, and there was kind of a shallow depth of field, I think, when this image was taken. I would have liked the nose to be a little bit more in focus, but I think it's okay for what we're doing. All right, so what we're going to do in the next lesson, we're going to continue to focus on the skin, and I want to basically kind of pull out just a lot of the red that we have in here. It feels a little bit kind of sun-cooked. So I want to kind of pull some of that out. So we'll go through some specific steps to do that. So stick around, and we'll see you then.